If this month on Spooky 30s doesn't scare you, you're already dead. Welcome to Spooky 30s, a podcast where I, Stella Cheeks, a 30-something of questionable taste, invite my friends on to turn me into the horror-obsessed fangirl I look like but never was. Each episode, my special guests pick a horror property that I just have to know. We watch it, read a bunch of cultural criticism, both peer-reviewed and publicly published. Praise be to the internet scholars and Tumblr historians. And then we have, hopefully, a super interesting conversation for your ear holes. My special guest this month, I'm very excited to have on. You may be familiar with her because she is the queen of the Peg, Mary Kills, but she's also the host of the Divas of Design podcast and our very good friend, Jolene.
Hi, how are you?
My brain has melted. My brain is made of embalming fluid and yellow nacho cheese. That's how I am. But we'll get to it. So, as I very aggressively ask everybody on this podcast, how do you know me?
I mean, I know you through your podcast. Like, I was a fan, and like we just started communicating more on Twitter up until we first met last year in
we
October.
Went to a Shimmer show together.
Yeah, 2 Shimmer shows.
The last 2 Shimmer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which was
sad.
Yeah, that was a moment of sad realization when talking to Jeremy Leary, but
extreme joy and then extreme sorrow together.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I can trace how I found your show. It was like King of Trios 2016. I wanted to listen to some podcasts about Chikara. Found the Face Lock Feministas podcast. Through them, I found like Chicago See Rose, and then the Heels and Heels podcast, and then your podcast.
Yes. Our podcast being Not Your Demographic, formerly a wrestling podcast.
Yeah.
Now just...
Turns out, talking about wrestling every week
sucks.
Can burn you out.
Too bad I still have to do it. Anyways, you know, the internet is a horrible place, but sometimes it's really great and you can meet real life friends on there. So,
yeah. I'm a fan. Look, Twitter may be a terrible website, but it has helped me make a lot of friends. So,
yeah. And you are not the first Twitter friend that we've had on this podcast where it's like we met on Twitter. Yeah. Through like the kind of wrestling web that you just discussed. And then we met in real life and now we are just like friends. So Twitter, it's okay sometimes.
Yeah, look, take the good, you take the bad because you get some good.
Yes, some good. So what is your relation to the horror genre?
So growing up, I was a scaredy cat. Yes. But then, you know, in college, that all changed. I switched to TV film major. And I met some friends at the time, and they got me into a lot of horror things. So, like college and post-college, like every October, even like after that friendship fell apart, we always used to do like a 30 days of October, where it's just watching 30 things, not movies. It could be an episode of a TV show because like there's some like great Halloween episodes out there. But like it was just like so like that's when I first watched the first movie of the franchise that we will be discussing, but like, you know, I've like seen not all of them, but like a lot of the Friday the 13th, the Nightmares on Elm Street. Then like J-horror got big and we got real big into that, which was one of the original franchise that I had pitched, but like it's so long and I just really wanted to scare the crap out of you basically. Cause some of that stuff is really terrifying. It's like, especially, I originally suggested The Grudge. And like one of the things about that is like it, you know, for most people, they have a very specific safety mechanic of feeling safe. And this just takes it away from everyone. So, and also like there's no rules that franchise follows.
Well, I think that's a theme in your favorite horror movies, apparently. Rules? Who is she? I've never met her.
That's fair. But like that is like, you know, like versus like The Ring where like, all right, if you do this, you won't die. The Grudge is like, it doesn't matter what you do. You'll die.
You'll die. Well, I look forward to getting to that someday. But we have what we're discussing this week or this month. If you haven't guessed from the tagline, which Bobby said, you should write, if it doesn't scare you, you're already bored. And I was like, no, we'll do the original tagline.
Wow.
So that doesn't trigger you in how maybe this conversation is going to go. We are doing the Phantasm franchise by Don Coscarelli. Some call him an auteur, some call him a fraud. We'll see.
Wow. Oh my God. Those people clearly have never watched Bubba Hotep.
I actually haven't. So
get your ass together and watch Bubba Hotep. It's got your boy Bruce.
I know. I'm sorry. I watched 4 Phantasm movies in a single day. I think I need a Coscarelli break.
Okay, that's fair.
Before we get into it, why did you pick this franchise?
So, originally, like I said, The Grudge, but Phantasm is just real weird. And it's 5 movies. So and they're not all 2-hour long. So it's just all right, this is easier to get through than most franchises. I'd love to talk about the Child's Play franchise, but that has a whole TV series now too. And there's then there's the reboot, which I'm I hear that's just the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode where it's just this doll was set to evil, but this was just the tall man. I love the tall man. Angus Scrimm is so intimidating as the tall man, and his voice is incredible.
Angus Scrimm, the tall man, is the tall, shining beacon of goodness in these questionable films. Yeah. I will agree with that. I think I get why these were made, in that he is iconic. He does fall into that pantheon of iconic horror villains. So I will agree with you there. Also, Angus Scrimm, in some of the interviews I read, was low-key really shady about these movies, and it was very funny.
Yeah. Let's see. I've also got another Don Coscarelli thing. He did an episode of Masters of Horror. I think it was Night Along a Lonely Highway, or Mountain Highway. And Angus Scrimm is in that too, of course, because, why not?
Yeah.
Because it's...
Yeah, if you know Angus Scrimm, you say, hey, do you want to be my thing? Because you're you're really cool. I want to hang out with you, and you're so tall.
Okay. And then, so this goes part into history. I was first shown Phantasm 1 back in the 2000s, we'll say, because it was probably post-graduation. But and I loved it. I loved the first one. I think it's a really good horror movie. And I understand why they wanted a franchise, because it made enough money. And Don did not want to make any sequels.
Yes.
But then the thing was that really got me obsessed with it is you cannot, at the time period, you cannot watch Phantasm 2. It was not legally released in DVD in the United States up for decades, for so long. So you get Phantasm 1. You can get Phantasm 3 and 4.
Damn.
You couldn't get Phantasm 2. But I found Phantasm 2. I had a region-free DVD player because I'm a media freak. And then I found this online. So, because it's an audio podcast, it is a replica of the sphere with the blades in the front. And it is a 4-disc compilation of the first 4 movies. This is UK DVDs, so I can't even play them on most of my players anymore, but it's got this little clear base, so it looks like it's hovering.
That is very good. As somebody who has a Star Trek Enterprise that you open up the hull and it has DVDs in it, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's got the first 4 movies and then a bonus disc, which I've never even popped in, which I probably should have for the podcast, but
just pretend
I'd have to find one of my old players.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for you.
So before we pop into it, we are going to talk about them all. We're going to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But
it's look, I was told, 4 is what they told everyone. It would answer all the questions of 1 through 3. This was what 4 was supposed to do. Then it just raised more questions.
The questions are the answers.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, movie synopsis via the Google, because as you know, I hate writing synopses. For Phantasm, the first movie is: the residents of a small town have begun dying under strange circumstances, leading young Mike to investigate. After discovering that the tall man, the town's mortician, is killing and reanimating the dead as misshapen zombies, Mike seeks help from his older brother, Jody, and a local ice cream man, Reggie. Working together, they try to lure out and kill the tall man, all the while avoiding his minions and a deadly silver sphere. And then the two peer-reviewed articles that I read for this, one is called Spheres of Orientation on Why Don Coscarelli's Phantasm series is More Cerebral Than One Might Think by Lori Dundenhofer from her book about embodiment and horror. And then the other one was Why Some Ghosts Don't Know, Spectral Incognizance and the Horror Film by Aviva Briefel, which doesn't actually have a lot to do with Phantasm. It doesn't have anything to do with Phantasm, but it talks about ghosts and the afterlife and how we as audience views the afterlife through the like lens of a ghost. And I think it has a lot of parallels if you're just thinking, not parallels, as interesting things to speculate on if you're just thinking about the first film. That's how I will say that. That article was quite good. The first one sounds like it would be good. It was not great, but the second one was very good. So let's just hop into it. My relationship to this is that I didn't know anything about these movies at all. When I Googled it after you told me that we were going to do it, I kind of vaguely recognized Angus Scrimm and like the oeuvre of the like tall man. And I was like, okay, yeah, I kind of understand this. I had no idea what I was walking into. Based on the name Phantasm and just like the meaning of that word, I thought it was way more about ghosts. That it took like a weird
nope.
sci-fi turn that I was not expecting. So yeah, my relationship to this was like I had barely ever heard of it, and I just maybe have seen a screen cap or two of Angus Scrimm. So I knew basically nothing walking into these movies, which is nice. I like doing that. And I watched the first one by itself, and I was texting like Jolene or maybe the Discord, and I was like, what is happening? This is so confusing. But I did actually quite enjoy the first one. The first one, you know, people talk about the Phantasm series and like the dream logic and the surrealist, like.
So like the first one's the most straightforward.
Which is
in a lot of ways
thing to say, because it's actually, I feel like, the most confusing one, but it's the one that feels like it's confusing on purpose, or confusing with a purpose, not on purpose necessarily, confusing with a purpose is what I'll say.
Yeah, and like the story is like they shot like 3 hours of footage, but they only used an hour and a half. So like later on in the franchise, I'm like, what? Oh, there's they just reused so much. They just picked up the edit, all the cut footage. I'm like, yeah, no, here's flashbacks to that you never saw before of like young Jody and Mike driving together in the car, or young Reggie and Mike.
Mike stealing ice cream from Reggie's truck, and Reggie just being like, that rascal.
Like, and this like boring scene where like they're just playing guitar on the porch, like, all right, whatever. Like, what a weird movie.
That boring scene is in the first one because they have whole.
Yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, the tuning fork thing plays back, I guess.
So obviously, if you can't tell from some of my ramblings at the beginning, I did not enjoy the experience of watching all of the movies. I think that this franchise is a franchise of diminishing returns. And I think with each subsequent movie, I hated it more. But I would like to talk. So I would like to break this conversation up into two conversations. I want to talk about just the first film and what I think and we think about the first film, why it has this legacy, what's good about it. And then we can pretend that we only watched this one film and that we're having a good time. And then we'll split it and talk about the rest. And I'll be mean. This is interesting because this is the first time I'm recording Spooky 30s where I'm not like weirdly obsessed, where I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. And it's my new favorite thing now. I need to buy the merch. With this one, I'm like, okay, objectively, the first one is very good. But so let's just go with that first. So the first one. Great. Well, the third one's great because of Tim, and we'll get there. I have a lot of feelings about Tim. Tim really saved that for me. But like the first one is visually stunning, right? It's really cool. The plot is not important, basically. Like we have this question, right? Is the horror on top of the plot, or is the plot dependent on the horror? And it's the horror is on top of the plot because there is no plot, essentially. This movie,
no, not really.
this movie operates on dream logic. Like, I like the idea. I kind of want to go back and watch this movie again, just to like wash the taste of the rest of the movies out of my mouth. But also now, having done all this research, like watching it and thinking, well, this is just a dream, right? Not necessarily that's the point, but viewing it as like, what if I'm having a dream, right? Why would blood be yellow? Why the time jumps? Like, what? It seems very much like that movie operates completely on dream logic. Like when you're dreaming and you're like, oh, well, I'm talking to this guy in my dream and he doesn't look like Bobby, but I know that it's Bobby. It's like that type of logic. And so I think that is really interesting about the first one. And, give Don Coscarelli his due, I guess. It is visually really cool. Like the
Look,
set pieces.
I miss like old-timey horror movies because they just have a look and aesthetic to them that just doesn't exist anymore. Because lots of times now everything's like digital effects, CGI effects, and like here's a ball on a string.
Yeah, I read in something that they would throw the spheres and then just reverse the footage so that it looked like that they were flying. And I was like, that's ingenious. That's great. And it also gives that weird otherworldly feel to it because
it doesn't move right.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Like that type of, I mean, we're big fans of practical effects here at Spooky 30s. So I agree with that. Also, I make fun of it in my notes. I call it like nacho cheese blood or whatever, but like that yellow, Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars, but he was like, but that moment when all of that yellow blood came out, that was a pretty good moment. I was like, yeah, it was a good moment.
Ebert's a very interesting critic when it comes to horror.
Yeah.
Because he'll give something like low ranking, even when if you read his reviews, they're praising of all the effects. And like, if you're a fan of horror, this is great. I'm not, so it's a low rating. I'm like, that's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. I think Roger, I like reading his reviews of the older horror because of that, but also because I think he does try and be a little fair where he's like, this scene is good and this part is good, but also.
Yeah. And like I like we said, like the thick yellow goo or like the thick red like paint like blood. I've always been a fan of that. Like with like Italian giallo movies, where like the blood is just like paint. It is just like the color of bright red paint, and it's just like a style that's I don't know. I'm super into that aesthetic in horror because it's surreal. It's not normal looking.
The thing about maybe not Phantasm 1 so much. So Phantasm 1 has sci-fi elements too, but like this is like feels in many ways more like a sci-fi series than a horror series.
Oh yeah, no, it's mostly considered that a horror sci-fi.
And that's like a common sci-fi thing too. Like if we're both big Trekkies, like Vulcans have green blood, Klingons have purple blood. Like I'm a big fan of the Technicolor blood too. And it makes it immediately otherworldly, right? Like we don't know that the tall man is otherworldly for sure, really, until that moment, right? Because we see him pick up the coffin, and Mike's like I don't know.
The full-on casket with presumed dead body inside. It's just like one-handed. Like it's just like a great, like terrifying scene for like the main character's a child too, right. So
and and so like we see that and it's like that's totally abnormal, but like you could maybe explain it away. I don't know, maybe there was like a lift we didn't see, but then the moment you see the yellow blood, you're like, oh no, he is an otherworldly being, whether that be we don't know at the time when we see the blood, but whether that be like a ghost or a demon or an alien from another dimension or a 19th century mortician.
Yeah, whose cut off fingers turn to weird bug thing.
Yeah, they go through a metamorphosis. Yeah. I saw in one of the articles I read, there was like a screen cap and said of the fly, and it just said, this was found in the dumpster behind Jim Henson Studios. It's like, accurate. But like that's the thing too, like the movie, like the characters and the dialogue aren't even necessarily that important. Like it is about the feeling. The movie is about the feeling you get watching it and the disorientation. And then like by the end you think, oh, well, we kind of figured it out. Like the kid was maybe dreaming and his brother died and like, okay. But then, we're wrong again because the tall man shows up and it's like, wait, is this a dream? Is this a reality reset? Is this, and we see like talking about the sci-fi element, we see a scene where like Mike has a sci-fi book on his desk, and it's like, okay, he could have read that book and then dreamed a weird sci-fi
like,
thing.
So like there's so much in it because like it's based off like things that Don was afraid of. Like he had dreams of these silver spheres flying at
chasing
him.
him with like needles.
Yeah, he was afraid of like what are they? Are they called mortuaries or mausoleum? Like
mausoleums, yeah.
And like it's like I'll just make and like I think it originally like a lot of people laughed at like the horror. I don't know if it was this one or a previous movie. So like, all right, we'll just do a full-on version of that, so to get more audience enjoyment out of it. It doesn't matter as long as they're having fun. But like, he goes to his fortune teller friend, and it's just straight up Dune lines.
Oh my god, I was just sitting there and I was like, "Is this Dune? Is this just Dune? Fears the mind killer? Is this just Dune?"
Yeah, like I have this whole running dialogue. Like I kept notes for each movie and like my word docs, and like I was like this, like some comments I'm like, this funeral home is so massive. I don't think these people could afford this place, but that's a different story. But like I love like how it opens with graveyard sex, which is a staple of horror classics, let me tell you. But yeah, like it's just Dune fears the mind killer.
Fears the mind killer. And the whole like the pain box. Yeah, I love this idea. I read in one of the things I read, it was like film appreciation, like by Cody Hammond, Life Between the Frames. It was like a blog. We'll link it in the notes. But this line that he wrote, Coscarelli was fascinated by the American way of death, how we hand the bodies of our loved ones over to a mortician to work on them behind closed doors and prepare for the event of the funeral later. His own Mr. Dark from Ray Bradbury's book, Something Wicked This Way Comes, his own Mr. Dark would then be the mortician known as the Tall Man. And I specifically like the idea of it being like this like Western American way of being like, here, take our dead. We don't want to like deal with it. We have like these very polite ways of thinking about death. Like, you're allowed to grieve for a couple days and then you're supposed to shut it all down. And like we really sanitize all of the funeral and death, even though death is not sanitary. It's messy and emotional and scary and all this stuff. But because we have this, Western American view, we have to have it like clean and modern. I really like the idea of him turning that idea into a horror thing. And especially when you go into that mausoleum is terrifying. It is it's hyper
so
modern, right? It's
just like everything's
white like aesthetic.
And mausoleums are also generally pretty creepy because
they're full of dead bodies.
But it's always like usually perfectly clean marble and everything. I'm like just the shots of the child walking through, and then like the tall man opposite, and Angus Scrimm's already tall, and they've got him in lifts and small clothes to make him look even taller.
Yeah, I loved reading that when I learned that he was wearing suits that don't fit him to make him look like he was like bursting out of his outfits to make him look even bigger. That like stuff like that visual stuff that's simple but super effective.
Yeah, I genuinely love the first one. The other ones, like, I love that they exist. And like, I don't know, there's the story of like, this is the franchise that spends almost a decade before it gets a sequel, which no one ever expected. And then like the fastest turnaround between a sequel is like 4 years from 94 to 98. And then there's 18 years before the finale.
And what a finale it was.
It's something.
Yeah, I like the idea of the first one having this dream logic element, but also the idea of like this backlash against American like cleanliness used in like the, sanitize is the word. And this like modern, taking something that's like kitschy and colorful and messy and then making this like uniform modern thing, I think really lends itself to the idea and the mythos and the, I guess, drive of the tall man too. Like in that article that I mentioned, Spheres of Orientation, it was a really convoluted article trying to make analyses between like the how the brain works and how the film actually lines up with like the frontal lobe. I don't know. I do not recommend necessarily reading this. You can if you want. It will be linked in the notes. But one thing that she did mention that I really liked is the idea that the tall man represents like the conformity, right? He is in this like very small but crisp suit. He is taking the messiness and the mystery of death and turning everybody's bodies into a uniform, smaller, controllable shape, and then lobotomizing everybody and then taking their brains and putting them in the spheres and making that uniform and rigid and following the same line of logic and falling in line. And like that seems that is horrific. Right now, the physical element of it is horrific, to be like, oh, after death our bodies are being used against our wills, but also like after death hell is uniformity. Like hell isn't being like tortured and stuff. Hell is like losing your complete identity, losing your culture, losing everything that made you, which is like a really fucked up way to think about like Oblivion. Not the movie, just the word.
And like other interesting things for me is like this was filmed I think I found like learned recently, or this is one place that I read it and I didn't see many other places, but like all the photography like was done in 78.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't released until 79. And like Nightmare on Elm Street, like the big dream, horror franchise, didn't come out till 84. It's like, and this does that, like that does the same exact ending as this movie, because like, oh, it was all a dream, or was it?
Oh, was it?
Yeah. And like this, like we've called back like the Dune references, but then they like Star Wars came out a year before this was filmed, and like, oh, I guess those are Jawas, maybe. So like, because sci-fi, like outside of Star Trek, had not gotten like as huge. Like Star Wars was only a year out, basically.
Yeah.
And so like this is like, hey, horror, sci-fi. I'm gonna throw everything that I like and I'm afraid of in this.
Yeah, I read somewhere that like originally, like he had the idea of doing something with Ray Bradbury, something Wicked This Way Comes, which, once I learned that, I was like, that makes sense, because Ray Bradbury, I haven't read that particular one, but Ray Bradbury is known to like write absurdist stuff and more surrealist stuff. So like that really falls in line with this. But then those rights were sold somewhere else. So then Don Coscarelli, Disney ruins everything.
It is a great movie.
Is it?
It is an incredible horror movie, because they've only made 2 horror movies in their entire existence under the Disney label. That and The Watcher in the Woods, both great.
Okay.
Not on Disney Plus.
Because they don't want their whole like shtick to be ruined.
But they're so good.
I will have to read the book first. My toxic trait is that I read the book and then I never watch the movie, but I will try and read and then watch the movie.
I watched it as a kid on television, so it terrified me. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like old Disney or kid stuff from like the 70s and 80s that are like pretty freaky. Like even like Bedknobs and Broomsticks, or
like the movie that I remember terrifying me as a child was Mr. Boogedy. But looking back, that's like a really silly comedy. And like I was scared of the Haunted Mansion in Disney World, because like I don't know, I remember like this green thing in the elevator scene. But like looking back, I'm like, oh, that was probably just my child brain making something up that's far worse.
Well, that's a good segue too. Like the cool thing about the first one and some of the other ones too, I would say specifically probably Oblivion, is that a lot of the scenes are like Mike, this child, seeing something and then his brain kind of filling in the gaps and being like, but it's probably this. And like that's, in thinking of Oblivion specifically, Oblivion to me is Mike wrestling with his memory. Like, can I trust my own memory? Like, especially because Oblivion has a lot of the footage that wasn't used. So it is like a time jump. And then there's that weird thing where they're like in the Civil War or something. I don't know. Whatever. But so then it's like, can I trust my own memory? Can I trust what I'm seeing? There's that line from Jody, I think in the third one, that's something like, well, you can't like trust what you see, Reg, like, or you can't, I don't know. I have it written down. I'll find it. But the whole idea of like, just because what you see, like the thing that you see is not necessarily what's happening, because that's the way that like memory and the way that our brains work, right? Our brains fill in gaps all the time. That's part of the reason that I can't proofread my own fucking writing, because my brain fills in the gaps. I'm like, yeah, totally. And then I go back to it and I'm like, well, I just sent a tweet that says bitch instead of butch. So I'm glad nobody saw that.
like I'm looking through my notes that I've taken, and because it's just like a director's commentary. I'm like, oh, I have no context for what this line was in regards to. Like, I'm like, Mike's reaction of, oh shit, I was like, I had to be in the funeral home, and that's a great reaction to whatever you just saw, probably. But
there are a couple reaction lines that are like when Jody sees the finger for the first time, and then he just closes it. He goes, "All right, I believe you."
Yeah, like
it's the most casual way to be like, "I'm, God damn it, I'm in."
Yeah, it's like it's pretty hard to deny that. Okay.
Yeah. So I like the idea of the first one specifically being like kind of a dream logic. Like we don't know what's real, what's not. We don't know what's memory, what's not. I specifically think of that scene where it's like Mike in his bed sleeping, and then it pulls out and he's in the graveyard, and it's like, what is real? What is a nightmare? Is this a nightmare? And then the way that it ends too, like, oh, Jody was dead the whole time, but here's Reggie, your friendly neighborhood ice cream man. I guess this is before ice cream man was like synonymous with like pervert. I don't know. I'm letting it go.
I guess
I'm letting it go.
There's the comic Ice Cream Man. I think it's like a horror comic.
Yeah, I think it's like a horror anthology. But yeah, so I'm just letting that go. We're not. I don't think Reggie has a lot of problems. I don't think Reggie's like a pedophile. So I'm just like letting that go.
I remember reading one of the peer reviews where they referred to him like Reggie's like the surrogate dad basically for Mike.
I don't.
Jody died and Reggie took over because like they were best friends or something. And
I don't know what happened to the end. Yeah, Reggie has a wife and a daughter at some point. Who knows? Reggie is a nightmare.
That you never see.
Yes, they get blown up. I kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, I like the idea of Phantasm 1 being a movie that you're not supposed to understand. You're just supposed to let the aesthetics wash over you, let the dream logic wash over you, let the like maybe the acting is stilted because it's happening in a dream, and like people aren't super expressive necessarily in dreams. And I think knowing that it had 3 hours and it was cut to an hour and a half, and like we lost a lot of the exposition and stuff, I think that only
works
helps
better. Yeah,
absolutely.
Like horror movies don't need to be long because that's like most movies don't need to be long, but like horror is great. Like you get in, like you get like, all right, this works, and that's all that matters. And like there's like so many weird like. I remember like Jody riding a bicycle. I'm like, this is one of the most ridiculous. Like seeing a grown man in like Jody in the 70s, Jody riding the bicycle. I'm like, we know what your car is like, so this is so funny looking.
Yeah, your like, super cool car.
Yeah, and then like all the people go to the graveyard for sex. I'm like, is this a thing people do, or is this just a horror trope?
It's just the thing that people like Mulder do.
It's good that he didn't maybe sleep, or maybe he did because he's dead at the end, so we don't know. Like the tall man,
the lady in lavender / the tall man,
killed him through graveyard sex or not. So
I love that the tall man is this like we come to learn this like other dimensional alien something or whatever. But like at the beginning of his plan, he was like, you know how I'll get bodies? I'll just fuck them.
Yeah. I'm gonna just take
solid plan.
You know what? To the graveyard.
Alien overlords have needs too.
Yeah. Look, he said trans rights.
He did. Also, I will say one thing in favor of Ravager 5. I like that they brought the lady in lavender back. I was like, I like this a lot. Yeah. Thank you for bringing her back. It was weird that she was not in any of the other ones. Mm-hmm. So Ravager 5. That's the one thing.
They should have brought Tim back. That's the only thing that most people
should have brought Tim
at.
back. Tim, my tiny king.
Tim was so cool.
All right. Well, I think we've espoused that Phantasm 1 actually good, worth your time, very weird. I understand why it spawned a franchise. Let's talk about the franchise. So, like you said, it didn't happen until 1988, 10 years afterwards. I think it was Universal was like, hey, horror seems to be doing pretty good for us. What other shit could we turn into a franchise? Oh, this movie did good because it was made for $300,000 or something and made at the box office like 11.5 million. So like that's a pretty good turnaround, right?
Yeah,
so it's like
70s, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So like, okay, let's put some money in this. So 2, like you said, is this like aberration because it's got a lot of money, it's studio backed, it's a lot slicker,
but it's also got a lot of studio interference too.
It loses that dream quality.
Like, he wanted the base was like you can have either Mike or Reggie, and he's like, well, I got to keep Reggie, so that's why like
why we have to keep Reggie.
So I like Reggie because like he is the most average looking person. He is like Ash before Ash exists.
Yeah, but Ash, I don't know. Part of the reason I don't like the other movies, because like I said, the first one.
Oh, he's a scumbag, but.
Right. But the first one, it's like, I don't care that I don't care about these characters because that's not the point of this movie to me. The point is the like vibe, the aesthetic, the like, you know, the feeling that you get while you're watching it. And then being like, oh, what's real? What's fake? What's public? What's private? What's mainstream? What's unique? Like, I like that dichotomy that the first one presents. And then the second one and on makes it seem like I have to care about these characters, which I don't. I don't care about them at all. Like Reggie has no redeeming qualities. I don't think his acting is particularly good. I don't think his one-liners are good. Like Ash, at least to me, is like a complex character in many ways, and is a joke about masculinity and about machismo, and is a commentary on itself many ways, where Reggie is just like a fucking creep in an ice cream man suit who's like looking at girls that are like, Reggie should have known that, like, one, her name is Alchemy, so like, come on, that's not a real name. Like, and two, if she's gonna have sex with you, she's definitely evil. Come on, Reg, you gotta be self-aware here.
Like, by the time Ravager comes around, I'm like, Reggie, DTA, you should know better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even Oblivion, I'm like, you should. Every time you pick up a woman in the middle of the road, you know what happens. Yeah. Like that's.
Rocky didn't turn out to be a bad
didn't
guy.
Pick her up. Well, they met her earlier.
Met her in like a mausoleum or whatever.
And she was using her nunchucks with her friend.
Yeah,
which is like,
her friend who died immediately.
Yeah, I love Rocky, but I'm gonna just hit this ball with it. I'm like, girl.
And then Tim comes in and is like, I'm the best shot in the entire world. Yeah. I don't like the other ones mostly because I don't care about any of them. And they are, instead of being like the surrealist media, they're more character driven. And I'm like, cool, I don't give a shit about any of these characters.
And I wonder if like, because like real time, 10 years between movies, and like in home media, even harder because you don't get to like see them as quickly, if like watching them so quickly is like whatever, versus like, oh my god, I remembered loving that, so yeah, I want to see the sequel, I want to see what's going on.
Yeah, I don't inherently have any nostalgia built up, right? Like that is both
and part of the reason get into them until like 2000s when they were all already finished, so right. And except for the one.
Except for the one. Yeah, that is part of the reason why I think this Spooky 30s experiment is interesting, because like I don't have nostalgia for a lot of stuff, so I can be a little bit more critically objective. But also because I don't have a lot of nostalgia for things, like I lose maybe some of the like childlike wonder.
Yeah, like, and I like, because there's a lot of, I don't know, it feels like a relationship with the Evil Dead franchise, because like Reggie and Ash, like Ash and Reggie are very similar. Ash is way more enjoyable and likable.
Yeah.
But like, you know, they build the quadruple shotgun in the second movie. And I love that. It's dumb. It's got a pain in the ass to reload, but it's such a cool thing.
It's the worst because like, yeah, it's a cool effect, but then it takes a really long time to reload.
And that's before Ash gets the shotgun arm in Army of Darkness. Right. And like they do the chainsaw thing, and then Ash does the chainsaw thing.
The chainsaw and the flamethrower, the 1-2 punch. Yeah. I do love that sequence in the second one where they go on the like shopping montage, and apparently Mike and Reggie are mechanical engineers.
Yeah, look,
can just make.
It's been like, but they 10 do pay
years, for it. They're not bad guys.
Yeah, they do. They leave the money. I'm like, oh, that's a cute touch. I like what they
Reggie,
do. That
who
sort of
always has wads of hundreds for no like, reason.
The ice cream business was very popular.
Ice cream business was booming.
Or maybe like his wife had a great inheritance.
When she blew up, he got all her money.
Oh yeah, and I guess like the cool thing that we didn't talk about is like once Don Coscarelli imagined starting the second movie immediately where the first one ends. Like that's a great opening sequence.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like and they kind of keep that for the franchise
1 through 4. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Which is a nice running thread, which ties them together in a way that most other things don't tie together.
And they all end the same too, basically. Like, nope, I'm gonna just pull you through this thing, pull you through a window, or pull you through a glass shatters. I pull you through something.
Yeah, and to speak to the Evil Dead thing, like there is that cameo / not real cameo in Phantasm 2 where they're like weighing the cremated remains and it says Sam Raimi on it. Which I thought was very funny. Because Sam Raimi was like, hey, I'm on the same studio. I could be in your movie. And they're like, we don't have a role for you. We'll make you a dead body.
Yeah.
I do love that.
Horror directors generally get along great. So
yeah, it's just watching. The problem for me also with 2 through 5 is they all are so different. They all narratively, like all 5 movies narratively feel so different. I would say 1 and 4 feel the most like each other because there is that Dune element to them and the like surrealist element, but also 4 has a lot of footage from 1, so it makes sense that it would feel the same. But like 2 feels like a big budget action movie. They made it into like a buddy cop film. They're like driving through America, and it's like a buddy cop post-apocalyptic action movie without a lot of the dream stuff and a weird telepathic romance just shoehorned in.
Liz. Look, like we said, 2 had a lot of studio interference. So it's like, it's a fine movie. I like elements of it. Like there's great, it's like how I view WrestleMania. I'm like, all right, there's some cool moments. Like that's
it's rare that the whole thing is going to be good. There'll be a couple things that are worth it. I mean, the Alchemy Reggie sex scene is hilarious. Because Alchemy just is slash. God, I guess the weirdest. Or whoever goes for it. Just like,
the fact that happens and Reggie's like, okay, he's just like, yeah, this is normal.
This is, you know what? I've never had sex with a girl this hot. Maybe this is how they have sex. And then the third one, while 1 and 2 have comedic elements, they aren't comedy films, where the third one feels like a comedy. The third one wants to be Evil Dead so bad.
It's the Army of Darkness of them.
Yes.
It's
and the third one has like, we go from having these like dwarf-like zombie creatures to having straight-up comedy talking regular zombies where it's like, did you just stop the squishing process halfway through and say like, we'll squish you later, but I need you to go be like a full-size zombie with some quips. Squish you later.
Edna and the other 2, I love them. They're so dumb.
Love the 3 of them are like, they are like Hanna-Barbera villains. They are like Scooby-Doo villains. Like obviously a lot like more vile and violent, but they are that like old timey, like here's our pink hearse and we have like quips and like, oh, I'm a pretty girl, psych, I got these 2 guys with me and we're gonna take you for all you got. Like they were great. And Tim is great. Tim is the best. He is a 45-year-old Vietnam veteran stuck in a 10-year-old's body. Like he is the best shot in the world. He kills a woman with a tomahawk. He kills a dude with a frisbee with razor blades taped on. Tim fucks. Tim is the best.
That I don't know the actor's name, but like he's got Clint Howard energy. But you just saw Tim
in Pleasantville. He's the bully in Pleasantville.
Oh, okay. Well, you just saw this child kill your 2 friends, and you think you're going to threaten this kid? Like, get out of there! Like
he was like, "When I get out of this hole, I'm gonna get you." And Tim's like, "Get fuck! You're never getting out of this hole. Like, this hole is your grave, pal."
Incredible.
Tim rules. I read one article that was like, Tim's annoying. And I was like, close this article. This idiot doesn't know anything what they're talking about.
Yeah, like Reggie trying to like leave Tim behind. I'm like, that boy is better at killing than you. You want that child on your team.
I'm not a kid, Reg. It's like, he's not a kid, Reg. He is an adult. Yeah. I love that it was just like violent Home Alone. Like, the clowns with the knives and stuff. Incredible. Across the board.
Home Alone come out by that point? Because then like it feels like
it's weird because these movies feel like they're referencing things that maybe came out afterwards, came out before. I don't know. The time when are we in the film is confusing, and then when are we in film as like a capital F film is also confusing. But 3 is a fucking straight up comedy. Though 3 is Evil Dead, but then 3 is also a shitty Doctor Who episode, because this is where we get the scene with all of the spheres behind the tall man, and we get more of the origin story of like, oh, we put the brains in the spheres, very Cybermen. Like it is, which Cybermen debuted in 1966 in the 10th Planet. So like Cybermen have been around.
Yeah.
I looked it up. So it was just
I've been watching old Doctor Who. So I'm like, yeah, no, they're real old.
What Doctor are you on right now?
Still in the 2nd Doctor. Like,
I love the second Doctor with his weird pants and his flute. I like him a
yeah,
lot.
I mean,
He's
it's also
adorable.
like, it's also the heartbreak of like, there's so much of his stuff that's missing.
Yeah, because
that
they
like,
taped
yes,
over
I
it.
love you because I get the least amount of you,
Yeah.
basically.
He has
And
a
like,
flute.
it was he's such a like, I know, like when they get to the three doctors, the first doctor was like, oh, this is my replacements, a hobo and a dandy.
Yeah. It's
I'm
like,
like, accurate.
accurate. Anyways, yeah, so it has a very, and the like special effects of the like flying orbs and stuff, because this was the first one that was straight to video, and it really feels like that. And Doctor Who, part of the charm of it is that the special effects have always been, I mean, the Daleks are made out of plungers. Like, that's the charm, right? That it's always kind of been low budget, even when it had a budget. And so it does that just like the moment they took the brain and put it in the sphere, I was like, well, these are little Cybermen now. So it feels very. But then also the third one is where Jodie is like, hey, I'm a sphere because apparently I survived. My personality survived lobotomizing. But then is it like, but did it? Because there's that scene where I think it's in Oblivion where Mike is like, I can't trust you. I don't know. It's a mess.
Yeah, like,
Three's a
and
mess.
someone keeps like zapping it or whatever. So three's a delight.
Mess, but is the most enjoyable to watch of the sequels because of Tim and Rocky
and the pink hearse people.
And the pink hearse, and like the scene with the like Cybermen style transfiguration is cool.
They bring back the flashback to Tall Man doesn't like the cold, so they try to freeze him.
Yeah,
like there's some like, again, great moments, memorable moments, but like, look, I would agree, franchise does not hold up as cohesive or remain quality, but that's horror for you in general, I feel like.
Yeah.
This is just like, I'm gonna go weirder and weirder and weirder.
But it's not even, it's just the tonal shifts are so hard. And their tonal shifts are hard for me because they don't feel like there's a purpose behind them. Like, well, 4, right? We go back to the more like fear's the mind killer type of deal. And like, is Mike turning into a alien / is he a chosen one? Is he a sphere? Has he been dead the whole time? Is it his memory?
Got like the gold eyes and everything.
Yeah, the thing that is unclear for that one for me that makes it unenjoyable is like, is he like a chosen one type deal? Is he like the tall man's flipping like son or something? Like, is he an alien from whatever this planet is? Like, that was unclear, and I guess it's supposed to be, but I did think that like the scenes like when Mike tries to hang himself in the desert, and then like they flash back to when they did it to the tall man and how it doesn't work. And like, I like the overlapping time jumps when they work in that movie. They work really well, but then there's some where you're like, okay, I guess you're just filling time. Yes, he stole ice cream out of Reggie's truck. Good for him. But like, Mike's story is the more interesting story in that one for me, but then we still have to follow like Reggie and stuff, and it's just,
yeah, but without following Reggie, we don't get sphere boobs.
Oh God, sphere tits.
Which it's the like Reggie. Like, I had the note like, why would you say far out when you hear these weird noises and a woman's chest is just like undulating? I'm like, no, that's a get out of there.
He explodes them with this tuning fork, which is he's never been able to do before.
We've never tried before.
I guess. The whole tuning fork thing is like, oh, if I put my hands on here, then it's like a tube. No, dumb.
Yeah.
Reggie.
Or like that they have to crawl through that portal sometimes. Like, this is weird, but
yeah, I don't know. 4, I wanted to like 4 a lot more, but also I was just like coming off of 2 and 3. I was like, I don't know, this tonal shift is a lot. I mean, I do think the image of this Mike's sphere eyes is really cool.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I know, like, the wild ass line of "I was an ice cream vendor by trade." It's just like, this is a weird line for that hero, the quote unquote hero of these movies.
Yeah, especially if it's not a comedy, right? Like, because 4 doesn't feel like a comedy like 3 did, but they still put comedy.
Yeah,
comedy
like
lines in it.
They love to beat the shit out of Reggie because it's fun to see Reggie get the snot beat out of him, I guess. But it's just like,
he sucks.
Yeah, and like the final game now begins, but I'm like, sure.
Did love when the tall man was like, I don't know if it's in Oblivion or if it's in Ravager, but when the tall man was like, Reggie, oh, you're just like amusement.
Yeah.
Me. What are you talking about?
He could care less about this ice cream man that knows nothing.
I'm I'm here for like the kid. Like you are just like a joke to me. You're like entertainment. Like that was so ice fucking cold. But okay, so before we get into the fifth one, which is a nightmare, if we think about 1 through 4, to give it a narrative through line, which it didn't need. Like the more we tried to explain the things that happened in 1, the less fun those things were. Like I didn't need Jebediah Morningside's background. I didn't need to know if that red planet was another dimension or an alien dimension or if it was hell. I didn't need to know all of this stuff. Basically, I liked the like weird dream logic of it, but to give it some kind of through line, I still like, even if we give it the sci-fi, he's an alien, they're invaders, especially like when we get to the fifth one. I do like the idea of it being Mike specifically as his protagonist trying to not like battle death, but like, especially when we see him as a 13-year-old, right? As a 13-year-old, you don't think, well, I'm going to die. You're like, absolutely not. Death is fake. I would never die. And then his mom and dad died. And so he's confronted with death. And then, later on we see like Jody dies. And so this 13-year-old who thinks he's invincible because he's 13 is constantly confronted by death. And so then the tall man who has this Grim Reaper style vibe represents death. And then he, like, if he looks at that planet, we can maybe think of that as the afterlife. And like, this is what the afterlife is. So I like the idea of Mike specifically being like unaccepting of death, right? And that's kind of that article that I read, the like spectral incognizance. Like they talked a lot about like the others and the sixth sense of like the main characters don't know that they're dead because they're refusing to acknowledge that they're dead. They're refusing to acknowledge that like death is an option. And even though Mike, we think, is alive, he is like refusing to accept death, has turned the tall man who could be just a Grim Reaper or a god who's neither good nor bad into a villain and is now fighting him and has made him the ultimate bad. Or by the fourth one, you can kind of think like, what if Mike is dead and he's like just not accepting that he's dead and he's like turned this whole thing into like a fight for mortality, a fight for life, a fight against this like bad guy. But it's like, but maybe, dude, maybe you're just dying. And especially,
I mean, that plays into Ravager. Like the end of Ravager is just like the idea of like, no, what Reggie wanted is just be with his family and friends.
Yeah,
and that's why the tall man killed him. And like, yes, this is your afterlife. You are with them, but I still win. Like you don't matter, but I'll give you what you want.
Yeah, the reason I hate Ravager though, apart from the obvious things, is like 1 through 4 is about Mike's dream and Mike's reality and his relationship with reality and dream and the tall man and life and death and all of this stuff. And then in the fifth one, it's like, LOL psych, Reggie's the one with dementia and it's actually his whole world. But he made Mike the protagonist of his world and Mike is the one going through that doesn't make sense to me. Like Ravager would be such a better movie to me if Mike was the one that had like dementia and Mike was the one, because that also would make sense if like, they're at the asylum or whatever and Mike's in the patient clothes and then Reggie comes and Reggie's like, oh yeah, you turned me into like a hero in your fantasy because I'm like the only one left. Jody's dead and your parents are dead and I'm the only one that comes and visits you. Like of course you turned me into the hero of your fantasy. Like that would make so much more sense. Yeah, other than like we're trying to turn Reggie into the main character because we like this scumbag for some reason.
I think it's all, also I think the practical reasoning is Reggie's like 20 years older than Mike. So like it's easier to present elderly with dementia than like the middle-aged man with dementia.
But you don't necessarily have to do dementia. Yeah. Like he's already in an asylum in
That's 2. True. In 2, yeah.
Just be like he never escaped the asylum. He like pull a Buffy, right? And be like, "Oh, sweetie, you're insane. You're not the Slayer." Like just do that. Like that that's part of the reason why 5, if I try and make sense of it narratively, kind of falls apart. But it's the idea that
I understand that entirely.
Yeah. But part of the reason I like the idea of the tall man as an unforgiving, omnipotent, godlike creature who neither cares nor doesn't care. Like when he looks at Reggie and is like, I I don't care about you, man. Like you were nothing to me. And that feels like a very like God thing to say. Or like the scene in 4, I want to say, God, they really do all blur together, where the tall man has captured Mike and is like, and Mike's like, I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. And the tall man is like, you know what, your way out. Use your mind, boy. Like that to me.
3.
Okay, that's 3. One of them. That to me signifies like
that happens a lot.
You know how to get out of here. Just use your mind. And like you know that this is death, or you know that this is another world. You know that this isn't real. Just accept that that's not real. I know it was supposed to be said with like malice or like spooky voice, but like to me that was him being like, this is your own world. Stop.
Yeah. And like, I know you said you would probably like them better if they didn't try to explain things. I think audiences at the time wanted things explained, so that's why they tried to. But
totally. This is like, Bobby said this.
I don't. Who knows if Don had like his way and budget and could do whatever? Who knows what would have happened? Like, I doubt there would have been 18 years between 4 and 5. So
I don't know. People and fan service like websites and stuff give Don a lot of credit. And I think that he was like, I didn't really want to make a sequel, and now I had to make a bunch of stuff up. And I'm like, I guess I'm glad that like it made money and people like it and want to hire me for other things. But also, he doesn't get hired for that many other things. I don't know.
Really, no.
So I think that we give him maybe too much credit as a
like
auteur, because I don't really think that he
auteur is like such a nonsense title.
But when me and Bobby were talking about this in prep, like Bobby said something where he was like, yeah, these movies, the franchise at least, feels a lot like the dark side of fan service, where it's like, yeah, I guess fans maybe, especially because this has such a hardcore cult following, want more, want explanations, want more Reggie, want all of this stuff. But like a lot of the stuff that we've seen, for me at least, not buying into the cult, not having the nostalgia, is like, well, this is all nonsensical and didn't need to happen. Like it really, it almost colors the first one in a way where I'm like, is this good? Did I like it? Does this suck? But like, I think the first one is actually good. And shout out, I know he said it at the top, but like Angus Scrimm is good throughout all of them. Yeah. Even when he's 89 years old, like he died later that year. Like he still did a fucking great job. So shout out to Angus Scrimm holding it down. He's the only good actor in all of these movies.
Yeah. Like,
and Tim.
I'm looking at like Don's Wikipedia or his filmography. I'm like, look, his best things, the things that I've seen, Phantasm series, Beastmaster rules. I don't care.
I've heard. Bobby told me that I should watch Beastmaster. So I like sword and sorcery stuff. So
Bubba Hotep is definitely up your alley because it's a horror comedy. It's ridiculous. The episode of Masters of Horror, John dies at the end. I never saw. I'm like, all right, whatever. That does not interest me. It was like based off like this pointless waste of time. Book. I thought it was based off like a web article that they made into a book that then they made into a movie. But I don't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds like a thing that would happen.
Yeah, he hasn't done a lot, which, you know, looking at these things, you can understand why he hasn't done a lot, because like they're not all great.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. My suggestion, if anybody came up to me and said, should I watch these movies? I would be like, you should watch the first one and you should stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my friend, when I tweeted that I was going to watching them for the podcast, my one friend said like, and I was making jokes about like, yeah, this will totally make sense. Like, you don't watch these movies to make sense. You watch these movies for like trippiness and like cool sphere deaths.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fair.
The weirdest thing for me is that I think 2, the one with the highest budget, has the worst sphere deaths.
Trying to remember.
They chop off an ear and then they do the like regular one, but it doesn't, the like blood doesn't spurt as fun or as far.
Oh yeah, it's the best looking one in the first one when it's just
first
like,
one, which is like, it's to quote Spooky 30s Reanimator, it's a good bloody cum shot.
Yeah. Is it 2 or 3? Like, I think the gold balls are introduced in 2.
I think the gold balls are introduced in 2, and so we get the like the scanning and the like exploding rat, and like, oh look, they all have different powers or whatever.
Yeah, and like there's like here's all these different weapons now. I'm like, all right, well, sure, but I'm like, all you need is the blades and the drill, and that's like just so good by itself.
Yeah, I think the first one is great.
Yeah. Look, I didn't when I'm watching, I'm like, I think Stella will enjoy 3.
Yeah, because Tim rules and Rocky's hot.
Yeah.
Like,
it's very Evil Dead.
Yeah. I like horror comedy stuff. But 1 as like a surrealist, absurdist, like dreamlike horror sci-fi movie totally works. There's one article that we read, interestingly, it's the one that like kept calling Reg a pervert, but it was like girl meets freak.
Yeah, that one. I was like, I got so angry reading that thing. I'm like, how dare her?
I know. I was just like jumping over that. But they did make some good arguments. So the guy in it, I think his name's Simon, he's the freak in the duo, said, I might argue this movie is an example of a kind of extreme sci-fi geek drag performance. Gaudy, excessive, minutely detailed, but a bit incoherent. It's got a lot of gusto, but not a lot of common sense. The bizarre workings of the male nerd imagination are now something that can feel oppressive because it feels like part of the cultural hegemony. But there was a time when it might have felt radical and queer and bizarre in all the right ways. And I think the idea of 1 as like a extreme sci-fi geek drag performance is like a really interesting idea. And 1 in many ways, like how we've talked about The Thing and some other more, out there movies, it's one of those movies that you can read a bunch of different things into, and a bunch of different people can have different experiences. Like, oh, this is a great sci-fi film. This is a good dream logic. This is definitely about mortality. This is like a sci-fi geek drag performance. 1 is so nonsensical in many ways that it can be anything, but then the other ones just try and over-explain it. So then it just becomes.
And one, the scariest one, easily.
Oh, by far. 100%.
And like you said, like if they had never. So, like, the problem is, if they'd never made the other 4, I don't think Phantasm 1 would stand out or stand the test of time as well as it has. Because, like, it wouldn't remain culturally relevant that people like, oh, have you checked out Phantasm?
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's just like, but, like, it's still easily the best. And, like, you don't need to watch the other 4. And
it's interesting because then you just hear a bunch of people say that, right? Like, it reminds you that Phantasm 1 exists, and you're like, it's the only one worth watching.
Yeah.
Because it does have those
iconic
moments.
You might enjoy the others, but you don't need to watch them.
Yeah. Oh, also thinking you could think of the first one as like an interesting take on like adulthood and puberty and like the scariness of growing up, like, with a 13-year-old. I don't know. There's so many things that you could read into the first one that I think makes it part of the reason why it stands the test of time. Like the bad ones reminded us that one existed. But that one still stands the test of time on its own.
Yeah, like I love in 4 and 5 when they use the deleted scenes from 1. Because I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I never saw this before. So like, wait, did they? Oh right, how much? And then that's when I found out. I'm like, oh, they had a lot of deleted scenes.
Yeah,
just so much footage that never used.
Yeah, 5 they should have brought back Tim, but other than that,
yeah.
Tim remains a shining beacon in the shit hole movies that are 2 through 5. Do you have a peg, marry, kill?
Yeah, I got 3. I mean, the one's so obvious, but like, look, Phantasm 1, Jody, Phantasm 2, Reggie, Phantasm 3, Mike.
Well, I guess
fuck Phantasm Jody. Phantasm 1, Jody's hot.
I don't want to marry any of these fools. But yeah, fuck Jody for sure.
I mean,
Jody 1 is super hot, and then Jody just turns into Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, like, well, look, 10 years go by, he's not in the second movie.
But it's not even that he ages. I get it. We all age, and people aged roughly in the 80s. It's that he specifically ages into Jeff Daniels.
It's so funny and so accurate.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I'd marry Mike because, like, all right, whatever, buddy.
Yeah, I guess I'd marry Mike, and then I would. But like, if I marry Mike, I'm definitely gonna die. But if I marry Reggie, I'm also definitely gonna die. Ugh, yeah. These movies do not particularly like.
I mean, look, marrying Jody's the safest bet because he's the one that dies. So.
Yeah, but you don't.
But I don't really want to fuck Reggie or Mike.
But we're not fucking. We're married. We're peg marry kills. Okay, but if we're peg marrying kills, we're fucking Oh, we're marrying Jody, we're pegging Reggie, and we're killing Mike.
That checks out the best.
Yeah.
Oh, one note. I forget which movie, but like Reggie undid the ponytail. I'm like, oh, you're Paul Heyman. You are Paul Heyman.
Well, in the second one, he doesn't even have the ponytail. He has a little bit of longer hair, but they like cut it. And then the third one, when like it's not studio, they get the ponytail back.
Yeah. I just remember him like letting it loose. I'm like, it's a full on skullet. I didn't realize you were Paul Heyman.
I think it's the third one.
Yeah. It might be 4 because
it might be 4 with the.
It doesn't matter. It's just like when I realized that, it's the funniest thing
with the orb tits.
Then like the other two are like, fine, like a Lady in Lavender, Alchemy, or Edna.
Edna is the tits
from
one?
3. No, she's from 3. Tits was a runner-up.
Edna is the one that drives
the zombie. Hearse. Yeah, she becomes the zombie.
Honestly, I feel like I'm marrying Edna. Edna was a fun wild ride. And I would kill the Lady in Lavender because she would kill me first. And then I want to know what it's like to have sex with crazy ass Alchemy. So I guess fuck Alchemy.
And then final one, which is like the hardest. It's so hard because there's so few recurring characters.
Yeah.
Rocky, Liz, or Dawn/Jane from 5.
Oh, yeah. Well, marry Rocky. I want Rocky by my side always.
Yeah, Rocky rules.
Also, Rocky ages incredibly. In a franchise where everyone ages like trash.
Oh, one of the funniest things when like first time I saw him was like, yeah, you know, like Mike, the actor that plays Mike's not in the second one. And my friend at the time's like, yeah. And then when he comes back like 14 years later for the third movie, it's like he hasn't aged a day. And then I'm rewatching, like, no, he has aged a lot.
He has aged many days. Many days have
I can see the similarity of like, I can see his eyes. Yeah, like, but no, he has definitely aged 14 years.
Yeah, it's interesting when they do callback stuff because, like, it was so fan servicey to see Rocky, but like Rocky ruled and she aged beautifully, so it was kind of fun to see her. But like, I think it was in the fourth one when we were getting the Jebediah Morningside stuff. The like witch blind woman comes back, and that was cool. I did like that they tried bring stuff from the first one and the other ones.
First lady or not?
Yeah, the one that's like, ha 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 ha, put your hand in this box.
I tricked you into a dune.
I dooned ya. You got dooned.
Well, yeah, marry Rocky, and then like I don't know, kill Dawn because she'll die anyway.
No, kill Liz. Liz was so annoying. We're sharing telepathic dreams. And Dawn was hot, so fuck Dawn.
Yeah,
kill Liz.
She is.
Dawn / what was her name? Jane. Jane.
Yeah. Dawn in one reality?
Dawn, the one that where Reggie
the one Reggie lady where he doesn't sleep with and she dies. Not evil.
Well, okay, so
he
first
tries
movie,
to, but she's like, nah.
She's like, no, I have Demeter for that, which is the goddess of spring.
Demeter as played by harvest. I can't never Daniel Roebuck as Demeter was like, what a weird. It's not celebrity casting, but what a weird casting choice.
Yeah,
because like I'm like this dude is from so many television shows. I'm like, why are you playing like this Swedish dude?
He's definitely that guy.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The first one that Reggie and Jody, their little jam session is actually kind of nice and like a sweet moment. And then any other time Reggie picks up a guitar, he sounds insane and not good. And the song he composes for Dawn is so embarrassing. And then when he tries to sing it again, it's like, I wrote you a song. And she's like, oh boy, you did not write me a song.
Like, he's the dumbest.
Embarrassing. All right. Do you have any other closing thoughts, questions, things you want to talk about?
I mean, not really. Like, I think I got the reaction from you that I was kind of expecting. Like, I don't know what I watched. Like, it's like, yeah, it starts off pretty good, but then what?
Exactly.
Yeah, and like really, I think like part of it for me was like the wait for like, oh yeah, I guess there's never going to be a Phantasm 5. And then they made one. I'm like, I gotta watch it. I mean, I'm like, does it hold? Is it good? I'm like,
No, not The answer is no, it's not good.
Like, I guess it's a finale of some sorts. It does end a story, I think.
Okay, what do you think the ending of 5 is? Like, what is the reading of you? Are they in some kind of like purgatory? Are they in hell? Is that actually Earth? Is this like a Cyberman Earth now where like the aliens like I don't know.
It's so hard. I guess my favorite preferred reading of it is Reggie died.
Yeah.
And like him together with Jody, Mike, and Rocky, that's his afterlife.
It's quite a Winchester moment.
Yeah.
Them in the car with Jody and Mike in the front seats and looking behind.
But even in death, the tall man still has corrupted his life so much that he cannot escape him when he gets what he wants.
But you don't think the tall man controls the afterlife?
I mean, I think he probably controls both at this point.
Tall man controls everything.
Yeah.
Jebediah Morningside. Yeah, I guess.
Would you like some lemonade, son? I'm like, what? Okay.
Oh, did you come through the portal? You're in these strange clothings. Oh man, yeah. I don't know. I guess my preferred reading is. Well, I don't really like reading the 5th one because I like the idea of it being like of Mike having like spectral in like the spectral cognizance where he's like doesn't accept that he is dead and that this is like this weird purgatory that he made for himself.
Like I think
then
like,
it switches.
If he's got a sphere in his head, he's dead. That's my take on it.
If you got a sphere in your head, you're dead. That's the
like you may be fighting against control, but you're dead.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be some kind of dream logic because Chunk, which his name is Chunk, not Chuck. I looked it up. Chunk survives of multiple grenade explosions.
Which one was Chunk?
Chunk is the little person in the 5th one.
Oh, okay.
The one that grabs Rocky's boobs when he asks for a piggyback ride.
Oh, right.
Peak cinema.
Yeah. Like,
yeah. These movies do not particularly like women.
Look, no, they're definitely not. They are super misogynistic. Yes.
Yeah. But the tall man said, gender, I don't care. I'm just here to fuck shit up.
Yep. Look, yes, we will have sex, but I will kill you. So
that is the trade-off.
But don't worry, you get to be a little person and then work for me.
Don't worry, you'll get to have a job it's job security. That's the real takeaway from this. The tall man, he will give you job security.
Yep.
And decent healthcare, I guess, because you get your little brain sphere. I don't know. All right, I'm losing the thread. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. I hope you had a good time. Will you tell the listeners where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Twitch. I don't really Twitch often. At Jolene -negative. You can find my podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Divas of Design. Yeah. That's it. We're also on YouTube at Divas of Design or on a lot of the podcast placings. So just look us up.
You can also find Jolene on essentially every Not Your Demographic production podcast because she sends in Peg, Mary, Kills to everything.
It's hard to keep up.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah. I'm worried about the X-Trex one. I'm like, I don't have anything else. There's nothing left.
Yeah. There's only so many pairings you can do. We'll get to the movies. Oh, speaking of X-Trek, speaking of Star Trek, a thing that I did not bring up that I had to bring up. And maybe this, I found this out after I had my opinions, but this is J.J. Abrams' favorite movie franchise. And I think that says a lot about that motherfucker. I think that says, enemy number 1, J.J. Abrams, this fucking guy.
I think I knew that and forgot. Yeah. I
if
try
he was
to forget.
I love the first one. We'd be like, okay, but he loves the whole franchise, and it's just like, JJ, I hate you so much.
Oh, so you mean he loves a franchise that sets up a lot of questions with no answers? Shocked.
Oh, man. I'm surprised. You know what? We're not getting. This is not J.J. Abrams' hate hour. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Jolene. I will talk to you almost every day.
Bye.
Oh, shit.
First of all, I don't know if you want to put this on the pot or not, but the Lavender Lady is a cabaret singer named Le Cat and put out an album.
No, she did not. Oh. So are you going to do a Lady in Lavender act for a horror show?
Not bad.
Not bad. I don't hate it.
No, I don't hate it at all.
This sounds like the beginning of a TV show in the 1990s. Like this is the theme song.
Sure.
It's got a coupling vibe.
This is the song called Lady in Lavender.
Ooh.
Oh, it's like sultry.
Somebody has to have done a burlesque act to this, right?
I don't know. I don't.
We have to look it up.
Don't know.
Lady in Lavender.
And her artist name is Le Cat. Lekat.
Act. I don't know if anybody has done a Lady in Lavender burlesque act to Le Cat's song Lady in Lavender.
To the actual Lady in Lavender.
That would be so fucking niche. Be like, I don't even hate this. Or I hate this movie kind of, but here I go.
I mean, you do a classic strip, but maybe you have like the orb and the knife and
yeah, and then you hump somebody to death.
To death.
To death. Welcome to the Nightmare Corner with Stella and Bobby. I forgot how this podcast works because we haven't done it in a while. So I don't know. I feel like you should keep all of that in. We don't have a nightmare because spoiler, not spoiler, you'll just listen to an hour and a half. This movie is not scary. I've had a lot of dreams about like nihilism a lot lately, which I think you could kind of read into this movie too, like the futility of the situation. The tall man always exists. Like anytime he dies or gets a finger cut off, he like transmutes into something else. So there is like a futility of fighting the tall man.
Well, and also just existence is just existence. It is something that just is. And if you search for meaning, you'll just have more questions. So if you just accept that all of this is random and meaningless or whatever, you can kind of just give yourself
just
up to the stream and vibe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The one article that I read, the spheres of orientation, again, overall was not like great, but they open it with the neuropsychological orientation, the like who, what, when, where, why. So like when you get head trauma, right? They ask you, who are you? Where are you? What year is it? Like they ask you all those questions because they're trying to see, is your brain orientating correctly, right? And watching Phantasm, all of it, but specifically one, like those questions are unanswerable a lot of times. Like, who is the tall man? Where is this dimension? Who is alive? And they ask this question, when we are in our monstrous? So like when we're a sphere or when we're the dwarf-like creature, when we're battling the tall man, like when we have like accepted that reality and like become like our monstrous selves. And I don't know, we're in our heads was like the like main thesis of that. When we're in our monstrous, we're like stuck inside our brains, and the futility of that being stuck inside your brain.
It was something Jolene said earlier on, and you kind of touched on as well, of just like, the purpose of that first movie is just the feeling of being in that dream and that unknowing, and that plus like the red blood. It is very Italian horror. So it makes a lot of sense to me that like that's what Coscarelli was vibing off of at that point. And then you get to the sequel 10 years later, and there's been this huge horror boom, and there's all these other kind of horrors. Yeah. And it just goes off the rails from there and never really course corrects.
It's really interesting, the first one, too, because we do get the, like, yellow blood, but we get the otherworldly blood, but we do get the bloody cum shot from the sphere that is so red, too. So you get the, like, the juxtaposition of both of those.
Right.
That article specifically was from a book called Embodiment in Horror, and we've obviously talked about embodiment and bodies and stuff in horror, and like the idea of like The Thing, right? Like, what does this mean? The grotesqueness of the body. Or like in Hellraiser, right? Like, my body is both monstrous and beautiful. My body is beautiful in the monstrous. Like, pain is pleasure, the like juxtaposition of that. And the like, these are the same thing. I think this movie, the first one, actually does a lot with that too. And then the idea of like, my body is monstrous, therefore my consciousness is monstrous. Everything is everything. Everything is nothing.
And the thing with Ravager is, the thing with Phantasm is, all of those themes are present, except that they're all present with Mike.
Yeah.
And we're stuck following Reggie around.
Yep.
Mike is going through this whole, am I turning into this orb person?
This like latent puberty thing
inside of me.
Yeah.
Delayed puberty, all of that. Like, all of that is there. We're just not following it.
Yeah. When I talk about these things and I try and make meaning out of them, that's the story, and that's the like in the mind and like whatever. And then I'm being forced to watch Reggie be an asshole with a shitty shotgun. That's not even that cool.
And so we talk about like the fifth film and why Ravager was made and that it needed to be like tied up. But
and because they wanted to use Angus Scrimm, because Angus Scrimm was 89 years old. Again, he died later that year.
That I absolutely understand. But like a driving overarching storyline in the Phantasm series is the relationship between Mike and the Tall Man, and what the Tall Man wants from Mike and what that all means. And the fourth movie ends with the Tall Man popping that orb out of Mike's head, and then we get nothing else from that.
It's just like Reggie dimension hopping and then finding Mike, who is now like a apocalyptic.
He finds John Connor Mike.
Yeah, he finds John Connor Mike, exactly. But one good movie.
Great vibe. Great vibe.
Great aesthetic.
Like another one of those horror
feel.
movies, like you said, where like the dialogue and the characters don't really matter.
They don't.
I could have watched that movie with just the soundtrack looping.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack is so good. I will talk about now. The
soundtrack, for one, is banger. It's so good. It has a lot of really, really ancient synths on them, like synths so old. They were talking about it was hard to get the same sound out of the synth twice, because every time you set the thing up and plugged it in, they would sound different.
Yeah. There's a lot of good shots in that first one too, of like no dialogue, no diegetic sound. You're just hearing the music and seeing what's happening on screen, which is great. The music is used so well in the first one, which I think adds to the element, like between the music and the aesthetic and the character of the Tall Man. Like, those are the three reasons that movie is considered a classic, a cult, a must-watch.
It was a huge cultural thing. And like, speaking of the music thing, there's a bunch of bands that have sampled
of course,
parts and pieces of this. Entombed used that theme in a song. There's a Mr. Bungle song with a reference in it. Municipal Waste, which is a thrash band, they also reference Phantasm. But all of them, they're only referencing the first movie, nothing else past that.
I'm looking this up because Marcus, who I do the Cage Side podcast with, who is a big horror person, he was obviously on the last episode of this podcast. He did he specifically was like, I want you to say this, because there was a band that he really likes, or a rapper I think, that sampled that too, and he was like, the music's so good, and he's gonna be mad because I lost the thread. I don't know where it is, but Marcus also wanted to point that out. Shout out to Marcus.
Yes. So it is a cultural thing, but the cultural thing is more built around the first movie.
Yeah.
So, no dreams.
No dreams.
No dreams that we know of yet. There might be, themes of like orbs and yellow blood seeping into your subconscious at some point. We'll have to follow back up with that. Spooky scale.
I mean, these are not scary. I would just think, okay, I'll do one and then I'll do them all together. One, I'll give it like a 2.5. Like, it has like or maybe a 3. Like, it's not scary, but it has like an ominous vibe. And like, there's some like it's creepy, right? Like, the Tall Man's creepy. The way that the dwarves are made in their like weird pod things.
Once you know like the process of how the dwarves are made, they become so much more icky.
The sci-fi elements are pretty spooky and scary. And the idea of being like, I died and now I'm like a slave forever is like also scary. The like existential horror of that, like death is just capitalism, I guess.
I mean, yeah, nailed it.
But then overall, like, again, I'm not joking when I say this is a franchise of diminishing returns. With each movie, my enjoyment of it went down. And so, I mean, by the end, it's like nothing scary happens in 5. 4 is like trippy. Maybe if I did drugs, I would like it more. 3 isn't scary. It's silly and fun. And then 2 is like a weird, it's like a weird action movie.
They really, I think, I kind of said it before, and I'll bear repeating it now. The franchise never course corrects from 2.
Yeah.
It
2
never gets
sets
back
the
to
tone for the rest of them. And like 2 clearly had so much studio interference that it poorly sets the tone for the rest of them. I feel like they try and course correct in 4, and then they totally undercut everything that they did in 4 and 5.
Yes. I would agree with that. Yes.
'Tis a bummer. So.
How dope would like James Blish style novelizations of
We need a
Phantasm
Blish.
be? We need someone to pulp the fuck out of this.
We need Blish to dune this.
Fear is the killer. I mean, fear is the mind. I mean, we can't say this whole line, but we'll kind of put it in there. Just put your hand in the fucking box, you little kid.
I'm just going to go through this door at the mausoleum and you'll never see me again. Bye.
So spooky scale, like we need a number.
I don't know, 1.
Okay, we got a bottom. We have a bottom mark.
Yeah, I mean, for how much I've said I like the first one, this is my least favorite of the films and franchises that we've watched. If we're in this moment scaling them, I'm not going to scale them all in order, but Reanimator is number 1, and this is the bottom for me. Oh, we did have a question from a listener, Jonathan Dye on Twitter, and they asked if you could have one prop from any of the movies you've watched so far, what would it be? It's surprising nobody. It would be the blanket from Reanimator.
Would you use the blanket, or would it be in like a vacuum sealed?
I'd get like a shadow box.
Yeah.
To be like, people would be like, "Why do you have this weird blanket on your wall?" I'd be like, "Well, this is the blanket that Herbert puts on Dan."
If something happened to Nick and he was in immense psychological trauma, would you smash it and then use the blanket for it?
It's definitely a breaking case of trauma blanket.
Yes.
He just put incredible. I love it.
Okay, and then we're at the images. Stella has told me ahead of time she does not want to break down movie by movie images that stuck with her.
Except for I did in the notes, anyways.
You did in the notes, so we'll go through that. So if there is one mental image that sticks with you, movie to movie, or just through all of it, what would that be?
I mean, the first one, I agree with Roger Ebert. The moment where Mike chops the tall man's hands off and we are revealed of this blood, which is like very alien, but then later in the movies, it's supposed to kind of be like, oh, is this like embalming fluid? That's one thing I absolutely hated about the fifth one. Amidst other things, I hated that they changed the color and the texture and the tone of the blood. It made me really mad. I was like, this is one of the best things about the whole thing. Why did you digitize this? Ugh.
I don't like that style of digitization in horror in general, but yeah, it took away from what it used to be.
I want nacho cheese blood.
Yes.
So that, I mean, there's so many good things in the first one, but that definitely. The second one, I had a hard time remembering and picking out ones in the second one, but I probably would say the scene where the priest gets hung by his rosary. That's pretty iconic. And also like the world's strongest rosary, you know, got the power of the Lord.
Really, really kept him up there for a while before it broke.
Tim, the moment we meet Tim tomahawks a woman in her face. In her face. Perfect aim. And then he throws a frisbee and slices a dude's throat. The guy could have just took a step back, but he just watched it. Tim with his perfect aim and his good quips.
Tim was too OP. They couldn't bring him back because he would have just solved the whole franchise.
Yeah, Tim would have been like, what are you idiots doing?
Yeah.
We stand Tim. The reason he died young is because he was too powerful. That scene with the girl and her tit orbs, or her tit spheres, her boob spheres, it was so bad and ridiculous and like cheesecake in the worst way, but also it did that thing where it like circles back around. It's like so bad that it's good, right? Like it was so stupid. And like the comeuppance too on Reg to be like, well, joke's on you, Reggie. I got spheres for tits.
If I was the tall man, I would maybe forget about the dwarves, definitely forget about like the gas mask guys and things like that. And my army would just be these honey pot pick-me-up ladies who are expert in the art of seduction and yelling yeehaw during sex and getting you in bed and then blasting you with their tit orbs.
With their tit orbs. Also, that begs the question, like, so were those spheres two independent spheres? So are they two people that are her tits?
Yes.
But because they didn't come from her because she hasn't gone, because she still has her brain, but she's like been zombified. The squish process has been halted. So those are just two people chilling in her tits.
Yes. And I love the setup for that earlier in the scene where like she's changing in that shower, but every time she peeks out, she has her tits covered.
You know what? I didn't even think about that, but you're totally right.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yep. Tit orbs. And then, I don't know. 5 sucks really bad, but like I would say the callback to the two women, I was so happy to see the lady in lavender again.
Yep.
I was like, why have she should be here the whole time because she is the tall man. He's been here the whole time. Even if you do with different actors and stuff, he can shapeshift. He's a shapeshifter. He could be whatever. He should be. So it was great to see the lady in lavender again. And then even though I have complained about the fan service, like the fan service sucks overall, but if we're going to do it, at least we got some good fan service. And it was nice to see Rocky.
Yes.
Because, you know, if I can't have Tim, at least I have Rocky.
Yes.
So yeah, those are the mental images that stick with me.
Fantastic. I think that's it. I think you never have to watch Phantasm again if you don't want to.
I weirdly want to watch the first one again with all of this knowledge to see what I feel like.
I would. So Halloween, October, right? We can put Phantasm on and I'll just play Goblin or I'll play like John Carpenter soundtracks or shit like that.
Yeah.
Like we could just have jams over vibes.
Jams over vibes. Just the mausoleum scenes with like different jams.
I remembered there. I think it is when he's like, it's sometime in one where the piano riff starts, but then guitars come under that piano riff. My brain was like, yes, this is it. This
Yeah. So that's it. We did it. Phantasm. We're still a little behind schedule. WrestleMania ruins everything. I think next year we'll probably just take WrestleMania off and stay on schedule. So hopefully we'll be back on time next month. But next month it will be interesting because we talked a lot about how Coscarelli was influenced by some Italian horror. And next month we will be doing Suspiria with our good friend Helena Handpasket, aka Kato AC from the new Shudder film Revealer. So if you want to watch her cool new film, you can. It's on Shudder. But if you just want to wait till next month, you'll get to hear her talk all about Italian horror. I'm actually kind of nervous. I have, in a different way, but a similar way to how I got pre-nerves about Hellraiser. I have pre-nerves about Suspiria, especially the original one.
Rightfully so.
I am also just so excited to watch 2 movies instead of 100. I'm pretty jazzed about that. But I'm also going to find the paper that the first one is based off of. So we're still going to nerd out. Don't worry. And I'm sure it will be easier to find papers about academic articles about Suspiria than it was for this. I don't know if you could tell, but it was really hard to find academic articles about Phantasm because nobody wanted to write about this movie. But we'll be back next month. In the meantime, I'm Stella Cheeks. You can find me on Twitter at Stella_Cheeks or on Instagram at Stella Cheeks. You can follow the podcast production at NYD Productions on Twitter and Instagram.
I am on Twitter at Haberdasher9K.
And that's it. I'm Stella Cheeks, and after 30 plus years of getting over my fears, monsters just make me horny now. Just like the lady in lavender. Play the song!
Spooky 30s is created by Stella Cheeks and produced by Bobby Hoffman for NYD Productions. Our show theme is made by Resonate_music, and our show art is by Lauren Moran.
I was busy thinking about